So I was like, I thought it was really...
Hey, give me your wallets. Give me your wallets.
What is that?
I'm not kidding. Give me your wallets.
You serious?
Give it up.
Is that a Wiimote?
No.
It is. I saw the string.
You just stuck us up with a Wiimote. Give me my wallet back.
Oh.
This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, reminding you to buckle up. Episode of iFanboy, the comic book discussion show from the website iFanboy.com. I'm Ron Richards, and I'm here with...
Josh Flanagan.
And I'm Connor Kilpatrick, and today we're talking about crime.
Listen, nothing was proven.
Alleged.
Yeah. I was exonerated, and you can't be tried for the same crime twice.
Double jeopardy.
An indictment is not a conviction.
Right, no.
Just because you're indicted doesn't make you...
Anyway, so crime has been a genre of comics that has kind of risen back to the prominence recently.
Well, we're talking crime comics today, and superhero comics dominate the market, obviously, these days in comic books. They do. I know it's really shocking, but they do. But that wasn't always the case. In the early part of the century when comics first started, there was all kinds of different genres. There was westerns, there was love stories, there was all kinds of... Any kind of genre you could think of, there were comics. The first recorded crime comic book was 1942 called Crime Does Not Pay.
Ooh, that was...
It was a lesson for the kids.
I was just going to say, it was a pointed direction, wasn't it?
And it was actually, before that, in the 30s, there was a Dick Tracy cartoon in the strips, in the newspapers, but there wasn't a comic book until 1942. Okay. And they grew in prominence. And then after World War II, actually, superhero sales tanked.
Yeah, they did.
And that rose all these genres really kicked into high gear after World War II. Crime books and horror books specifically, the publishers, as they do, just flooded the market with crime and horror books. And that lasted about 6 years. In 1948, that's when Wortham showed up. Dr. Frederick Wortham, who ruined comics. He published 2 articles in 48 saying how bad comics were for kids. And then in the 1950s, I think it was 54, was when Seduction of the Innocent came out, which led to hearings in Congress, the United States Congress, about comic books and juvenile delinquency, and they made all the publishers come and testify. Yeah. And immediately after the hearings, all the publishers either canceled all their crime and horror comics, or they just gutted them into the point where they weren't.
They sort of legislated them with the comic book code to the point where it wasn't worth doing.
But most of them just didn't even try to fight it. They just said, forget it, cancel all the books. So they basically, in the 50s, crime and horror comics disappeared. Yeah. And that led to the Silver Age, and superheroes became prominent. That's where we're at now. In the 60s, they experimented with some crime anthology books. So they tried it, but they didn't really commit to it.
And it was interesting, though, because a lot of at least on the Marvel, and you can speak more to the DC stuff, but the Marvel side, like Spider-Man was fighting crime. I mean, he was a crime fighter.
But this was different. This was real.
No, right, I know, but
crime.
it was light. It wasn't, like he stopped the burglary, but the story was he had to pay rent.
In essence, all comic books are sort of crime. Not comic books. All superhero books are sort of crime books, but we're talking about things that don't involve superheroes.
Right, gritty.
For the most part.
And they're all couched in costumes, like how science fiction can talk about humanity by couching it with aliens. But so that in the 60s, they sort of tried a few, and then in the 70s and 80s, there were a couple here and there, but nothing really too spectacular. But in the late 90s, you got guys coming up in the industry with a real noir bent to it, and they really that's when the rise of crime books began again. And you've had a lot of prominent books until the point now where it's a thriving genre of comics now. And so we're going to talk about some of the books that we like, some of the ones that came out in that 90s period, the Renaissance. We're going to talk about the ones coming out now.
Yeah, because there are a lot of great books that are coming out currently, like an issue like on stands.
That you can get.
So it's a good time for crime.
So one of the big guys responsible, the biggest names in comics responsible for the crime renaissance was Michael Bendis. And you were there from the beginning.
I was there from the beginning.
And actually, you were there with him.
I was there. No, you want to change that? No, I remember in the 90s, I just randomly. You know how you remember when you used to just randomly buy a book?
Yeah, sure.
I randomly bought an issue of JINX, not knowing what it was. And it was black and white. It was right around the time period when I was trying to find more indie books and things like that. And what I discovered was this black and white kind of photo referenced kind of style of art about that was heavy. Was totally crime.
Yeah, totally crime.
And
noir, just dark.
Yeah.
Stories where there's nobody that's really good.
Yeah.
And Bendis was a guy who he came up in this. I mean, now he's this guy he just controls Marvel, but he had JINX, he had Goldfish, Toya Torso.
Fire.
Fire was a spy story. It wasn't really a crime story.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was one of these books that Bendis did was one of the reasons why crime books sort of came about, because these became really popular. I mean, this is like the third printing of this. So there's like 10 printings of this book.
There's a different. That's the old cover.
Yeah,
they changed the look of it and everything.
Signed by Bendis.
Nice. But yeah, no, it had that noir kind of feeling, very dark and shadows. He was doing the art as well, and now if you read Bendis, he writes now, and
it's so weird to look at these.
Yeah.
And think, wow, this is the biggest name in sort of, one of the biggest names in superhero comics now, because they're so raw.
It's very raw.
It's very indie and it's very raw.
I
mean, it's a guy who clearly wants to make comics. There's the craft's all there. You can see everything there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting too that
crazy word balloons.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you think he does crazy word balloons now?
Yeah.
Crazy word balloons.
This is how he's working out what works and what doesn't.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. But I think the thing that's the most interesting about it is that for a long time, and I'm almost not over this, I still think of Bendis as a crime guy.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't the first stuff I read of his, but the first things I read were Powers, which is sort of a crime book.
It's a crime book, yeah.
But with superheroes in it. And then I went back and I read this stuff. So when he starts,
and he also did Sam and Twitch.
Right. So when he starts doing Avengers and things like that, I'm still like, oh yeah, he's the crime guy doing this, and people forget that, and so. And like me, this is my favorite stuff that he's ever done still. And I want to see him go back to this stuff. Cause
especially going back and rereading it after years of reading his Avengers books and things like that.
Does it hold up?
Oh, totally. But it's like you miss the raw passion that's in these pages.
Yeah. Now, JINX is the female character's name. She's the
bounty hunter.
She's a bounty hunter.
Right.
And of course, entails chasing down criminals and things like that. And then
Goldfish is the criminal.
He's the con guy.
He's the criminal who's also
he's referenced. They're in the same universe.
Okay.
Goldfish is the character in JINX, and then he got his own story.
Maybe I just bought them in that.
But it works for you.
Okay.
Even then, he was doing the shared universe thing. Like this was his little Bendis world. But this is, Torso was a different thing. We'll talk
JINX
World.
Yeah.
And if you like crime or Bendis, and you haven't read these are seminal.
Yeah.
It's rough. It's not polished. It's him doing it, on his own. He did this wholly on his own.
And look at the picture, little Brian Michael Bendis. These are still in print. Image Comics publishes them. You can get them in collections.
There's much nicer versions now.
Yeah.
They have all sorts of back matter and stuff like that.
Right. And this is really like kind of where his love, like when you hear him talk on Word Balloon or any other podcast, he talks like with love about these books. These are the ones that kind of got him where he is. And I think he wants to go back to them, but it's just they don't pay. As well as the Avengers do.
Yeah.
So.
He did JINX all on his own.
Yeah.
This thick book he did on spec.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Yep.
Another guy came around, Greg Rucka, who's another big name. He had Whiteout for Oni, and that's a crime book of murder in Antarctica. And a lot of the big names now, actually, like Brubaker did Scene of the Crime back then. A lot of the big names in comics now started off doing these crime noir books.
I never read Scene of the Crime.
Scene of the Crime is an early work with him and Michael Lark and Sean Phillips. Phillips inking Michael Lark.
And you might recognize those names. Sean Phillips, who's doing Criminal, which we'll talk about in a little bit with him, and Michael Lark's doing Daredevil. Yep. So
that's an early work of his, and then
through Vertigo.
Ron's favorites.
One of my favorite crime books, which we've talked about in other episodes, and these guys have lambasted me, and we're not going to do that this time. But a book called Kane by Paul Grist, which is a British comic creator, and it's a little it's a basic crime book. Follows a cop, and a little wacky, little British kind of wackiness, but definitely following this cop through this mob boss and kind of the insanity of the city he lives in and that sort of thing. And it's one of my favorite crime books.
So then you take all the stuff from the early part of the late part of the '90s, early part of 2000s, and then the guys Brubaker and Rucka, we mentioned before, then they go to DC and they do Gotham Central,
which was like
not directly, but this is one of the books.
Which is like porn for you guys.
Well, this was
you guys love this book.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is pure crime, and this is it's a DC comic taking place in Gotham City.
And the reason that it gets put on a larger stage is that it takes place in Gotham City. So Batman's there, but he's not really.
He's not a main character.
It's a crime book in the confines of the DC universe. So it's only a superhero book in sort of the loosest sense. Some of the villains in it show up. There's a really good Joker arc.
I would say it's less. Powers has more superhero presence.
Way more.
Book. Yeah.
A lot of the crime is just straight up murder. They find a body and they have to find out who murdered.
This is about detectives and cops, and it really was it was one of those books. 40 issues, I think,
Yeah.
and like every one of them was special. You read them and it's special. It's about the Gotham MCU Major Crimes Unit. So that
Renee Montoya,
Yep.
Crispus Allen, and
Josie Mac. Josie Mac.
Josie Mac.
Her
Def-
last.
I was going
Whatever.
to say Crispus Glover, but that's Crispin Glover. He's crazy.
There was a bit at the end where like it went. Well, with Crispus, like it became. One of the characters goes on to be one of the sort of bigger cosmic characters, which is very strange.
They tied it into the...
I guess shoehorned in Infinite Crisis.
Right,
Yeah.
which was, I thought, kind of a mistake because it...
Well, it was over by then anyway. But
Yeah.
the point is, this was the natural progression. These guys doing the indie stuff, the stuff from self-published work, but they and you can tell they still love it because they go to the DC universe. Rucka and Brubaker are writing Batman books, writing Detective Comics, writing Batman. But they wanted to do this crime book, but Brubaker's still doing crime books, and Rucka's still doing he's got a crime book coming out later. They still love this stuff.
And Rucka's still playing with these characters
Yeah.
whenever he gets a chance to. I mean, Renee Montoya is the question now, and she's the guy, she's the character that he's always writing.
His go-to character, yeah.
The thing about this was that at the time, I mean, obviously sales were not stellar, or the book wouldn't have been canceled.
No, they weren't.
But since then, there's been that
Resurgence of respect for the book.
Yeah, it's like it's grown in legend, and
Well,
people have gone back and read it, and like
Just hear you guys talk about it in reference, and then they started reprinting it in these omnibus editions.
this was the most pick of the week pick, I believe.
It might have
title,
been.
sort of in history. Like we couldn't not pick that book over and over. It's just great stuff, and it's funny because at first like there was like a couple of trades, and they were kind of crappy, and they weren't
complete.
They weren't in order.
Yeah.
And now they're going back the other way, and they're doing them in sort of nice hardcover
I mean,
stuff.
these are comprehensive.
Right,
This is the
so-
first 10 issues. So
I mean, that
four
shows
of
you
them.
that a market has built for them since these guys have gotten bigger names, and these characters are now better known. And good lord, Michael Lark.
It was the first work of Michael Lark's that I saw, and now I'm loving him on Daredevil, which is a crime book as well, if you think about it. But yeah, and Connor got me these trades, and I read them, and they're good. They're good cop stories.
And there's a lot of guys I know who don't, or people I know who don't read DC books at all, but really like these. I mean, it's literally just straight up police drama. It's homicide.
Yeah.
In a comic
It's
book
an
form.
ensemble cast, a bunch of different cops.
Yeah.
And Ruck and Lark's trading off arcs depending on
Ruck
the
and
day shift or the
Brubaker.
night shift. Or did I say Ruck and Lark?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lark was on the other shift. He was on the Brubaker shift. I wasn't technically right there.
Fine.
What are you, a message board poster?
Oh.
How tall is Christmas?
So that, I mean, that's sort of the early part of the 2000s ends with sort of Gotham Central.
Yeah.
And then you got to stuff coming out now. But this is sort of the history of the resurgence. This is the resurgence period of time
Yeah.
where crime books were coming back into full. But we could take a break, come back. We're going to talk about some books that are coming out now that we really like. Hey, everybody. GoDaddy.com has what you need. And what do you need? Well, .com names are as low as $1.99 a month. They got world-class hosting, fast and free website builders. GoDaddy's hosting plans have 99.9% uptime, free 24/7 support, and no annual commitment. The private domain registration from GoDaddy.com protects your privacy by keeping your address, phone number, and more out of the public database. You can customize your own virtual dedicated server by choosing one of 3 popular plans or by selecting your own Linux or Windows server with all the plan options you might need. You can get a GoDaddy.com secure certificate for your website, and visitors, prospects, and customers will have total confidence in your online business. And if you're a podcaster or a video blogger, you're going to want a .tv domain name to stand out from the crowd. Also, be sure to check out revision3.com/GoDaddy for all iFanboy's GoDaddy deals and codes.
Now we've talked about a lot of comics on the show before, so sometimes we talk about books that we talked about previously. When we talked about Image, I believe we talked about the book Fell.
Right. Well, that was a while ago.
Which is a while ago. Yeah. Warren Ellis, Ben Templesmith. And we're talking about books that are out now. This is kind of on the border.
It's technically out now.
Technically out now.
It has not been canceled, per se.
If you saw our WonderCon episode from back earlier in the year, you saw Ben Templesmith said that that the book is still alive. They're just not doing anything with it. Fell is great because it follows a detective, Richard Fell.
Richard Fell.
In the town of Snow.
Snowtown.
Tired. And they're great little one and done stories. They're 16-page stories, so each issue is $1.99.
Right.
But that doesn't hold up the story at all.
dense.
Templesmith fits a lot into the 9-panel grid that he works with. And Warren Ellis, I'm not a big fan of Ellis, but this book knocked my socks off when I read it. It's collected all in the first 7 or 8 issues. Yeah, I think they're up to issue 11 on the
9.
On the 9? Okay, or 11.
They only went 9?
I think.
I thought it was 11 was the
That's
last
the newest
one.
one.
Sorry. But you can get them all in a collection, and they're just a great read. Straight, problem, investigation, resolution, a little bit sadness, yeah,
despair.
I was gonna say there's a dour feel around the whole book, but that's part of its charm, if that makes any sense.
This is my favorite thing that Ellis has written lately,
Yeah.
and this is my favorite work of Temple Smith's overall.
Yeah.
It's a really, really, really good book.
So someday maybe Ellis will finish the script and they'll do more Fell, and I'll be reading it. But in the meantime, because I'm not as big of a crime fan as you guys are. Admittedly, for whatever reason, it doesn't.
For me, like I just love getting away from. Like you've read a million superhero stories, and I like superhero stories. It's fine, but I really look for books where they take the comic book form and they do it in the real world. And crime is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah.
And you can put so much atmosphere.
Right. And speaking
of atmosphere,
Criminal by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, after they worked together on Sleeper for Wildstorm, which was a crime book kind of spy noir,
it's
more noir.
It's on Alan Moore's Wildcats. So
crime fits into a lot of categories.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is purely pulpy, noirish crime stories told from the criminal's point of view.
Yeah, this is pure.
Yeah, and it's won Eisner Awards. It's really, really good comic writing, really good comic storytelling. The first story arc I think was probably my favorite one. Focusing on the called Coward, focusing on a
heist.
A criminal who gets caught up in a heist, and he always trying to figure out the way out of it. He gets branded a coward, but he's just kind of more self-preservation.
I like how the word heist is always used to describe a fictional story about crime. It's not like real criminals ever like, we're gonna pull a heist, a caper.
Do you know that? You don't know any real criminals. Maybe they talk like 1940s henchmen.
Okay.
Maybe they wear shirts that say "goon" on them.
I hope.
Goon number one. But so Criminal is, it's published through Icon, which is Marvel's kind of creator-owned kind of imprint, and it just every issue has not disappointed. It's just been every issue is fantastic.
It's on a little hiatus right now while the creative team does a different book, Incognito, but Criminal is, when it's out, is one of the 5 best books in comics at all times, I think.
Absolutely.
And there's been 2 volumes, 2 seasons, 2 series, whatever you want to call them.
Some sort of specials.
And some special one-shots, but anything, you can pick up any of the hot trade paperbacks or any of the special one-shot issues, and you can read them totally fine.
Yeah.
And they're just beautiful comics. One that just is ending right now is Back to Brooklyn, which is from Garth Ennis and this guy's...
Jimmy Palmiotti
and me.
Hello,
him.
What is it? Mihailo Vukovic.
Right, that guy.
Yeah.
And this is Garth Ennis does a lot of violent work.
This is violent.
And this is a pure mobsters in Brooklyn story. And one mobster decides his brother, the boss, is too despicable and decides to go against him with the cops, and then realizes he's got to save his family from the other mobs. It's just basically a mob story.
And very small, like
family-based.
There's not a lot of explanation. Here's there's the heads of the family, and they're against each other. Go.
And the Garth Ennis way is to really he drops you sort of in the middle, and then he explains things as you go and gives you all you need. And this is screwy. I mean, in terms of it's not screwy funny, like people getting hacked up, chopped off, mothers getting thrown into traffic by their sons, dogs eating people.
Yet oddly realistic.
Yes.
Well, there's no fantasy element to it. It's all completely realistic, other than the fact that it's exploitatively violent, I suppose. And I don't mean that. It's just like it's slightly over the top.
I don't know if it's over the top. I think it's realistically violent. I mean, if someone gets shot with a shotgun, they're going to be splattered all over the wall.
I'd like to say it's fun, but it's not really fun. But it's fun.
Yeah. It's fun. It's definitely, and it's wrapping up, so an Image will probably collect it because it's Garth Ennis, and
absolutely.
So in a few months, you'll probably look for the collection. It's really, if you like that kind of thing, it's grisly, and it'll make you not want to go to Brooklyn.
Ooh.
Wait a minute, where are we? Oh my God! And you tried to rob us. Good Lord. Put the Wiimote down.
Sorry.
Finally, for this little bit, I wanted to talk about some of the work of B. Clay Moore, who's one of the guys who's sort of he traffics more in the real world as opposed to the fantasy world, I think, for the most part. And there's a couple of books that he's got. We've talked about Hawaiian Dick before. It's a 50s story about a private detective
in Hawaii.
Yes, Bird, who's in Hawaii, and actually there's some elements of fantasy in it. A little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's sort of straight. Sort of 50s noir crime caper.
Private Dick stories.
There's a crime family, and he goes against them. Gorgeous looking book. There's nothing that looks like this in the market.
The atmosphere, the Hawaiian atmosphere.
Yeah.
Polynesian feel to it.
Like it's a book where sometimes the best thing about it is the coloring. Yeah. And that's not to disparage the rest of it.
No, the coloring.
That just tells you how good the coloring is.
Yeah.
you can check these out. These are definitely cool. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, and this is a little more along the lines of Fell, in that it may or may not exist anymore. This was I think a 6-issue series, but only 4 of them exist. It's been about a year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to keep coming out in issues, but if you can find them, there's a series that Moore did with Seth Peck. Basically, it's 2 stories called 76. It's a half and half book. So it's 2 separate, unrelated crime stories that each take place in 1976. And they're sort of like when you read them, you can hear like.
I was just gonna say you can hear the cheesy cop music.
Yeah, you can, and it's fun because there's nothing like it.
Like Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
The Moore story, which is the first one that shows up in each of them, is Jackie Karma and
It's like a kung fu.
Yeah.
Sort of exploitative, not exploitative, but that sort of
Like
the style of film back then, the kung fu film.
Blaxploitation.
Blaxploitation.
Yeah, you came out of retirement, now you're the baddest ass mother. Yeah, and they fight, and they have leather jackets, and it's just running, punching in giant,
and mutton
oversized
chops,
cars.
and mustaches that are awesome.
It's not the deepest thing in the world, but it's very set in those tropes of that thing. It feels very evocative of that sort of.
It feels like the time period, like
does.
almost
like a Kojak show,
like Hawaiian Dick does.
Yes,
he's good at building the atmosphere.
Absolutely. The second half of it is Cool by Seth Peck and Ty Walker. Stand out to me is in this is Ty Walker's art is really good. I think this is gonna be a name that you're gonna see. Again, and a lot more. Slightly cartoonish, very exciting. There's a nice sort of gray tone about it. This is sort of about like a drug deal gone wrong, and the girl picks up the bag, and then everybody's after her, and you're off, and one's on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast, so they have sort of a different feel to both of them. There's this sort of goofy drug kingpin midget guy. Really fun books. There's nothing like these, and I think that's. It's amazing that more stuff like this isn't done, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's
and the thing is, I blame you
because you're not reading them.
because you don't pick them up and you don't buy them, but you should. Yeah. One of the really fun things about this book is in the back of each of these issues, there's just little fun things like this one has the 1976 fall primetime TV schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of the first issue,
music,
all these factoids about what was going on in 1976, and it's just. I love because we're so wrapped up in everything that's happening now.
It really drops you back into the time period.
And there's just nothing like this. And these are cool comics, and they deserve to be checked out. There will be a trade paperback of this at some point. I believe that you can find parts of these online in entirety.
Oh, wow.
We'll throw the thing up there so you can see it. But these are definitely worth checking out too. And we have more books about real things when we come back.
And now word from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who remind you that the best way to avoid a ticket and to save your life is by buckling up. Go to nhtsa.gov for more information.
Hey, I'm not speeding. Why did you pull me over?
You don't have your seatbelt on.
He never uses one.
We'll get him to. Click it or ticket.
One question I've actually gotten a few times in recent, which is weird, is people have been asking me for true crime comics. Stories based on real events or real things that happen, real characters.
Because that's a whole subgenre
of crime.
Documentary of comics.
Yeah.
Right, and I like true crime, so they send me emails, and I go, oh crap, I can look through my bookshelf. But there's a bunch here that we have. 3 that we've talked about in the past was From Hell, which is Jack the Ripper. It's Jack the Ripper, but it's true crime-ish because it's a theory.
It's based off what really
happened. It's based, it's very historically accurate in terms of events. Whether or not his theory is correct,
by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell.
And that's something we talked way back in episode 1.
Wow. So go back and see that.
Way back.
You know what? Don't watch it.
Don't watch that one.
Just take our word for
this it. This is for me still my favorite Alan Moore book. For me, it's his opus. It's just great. And Eddie Campbell's art is beautifully disturbing. And that's just adds to that atmosphere.
This is probably one of the first comic books that I read, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do this.
Right.
I didn't know that a comic book could be like this.
And actually, and the last section is all appendices and indexing, and that's almost another book in and of itself if you read that. Because it's not just, this is where I got the list, it's not a bibliography, it's a paragraphs of him expounding on a panel, where he got it and his theory on the characters, and it's a whole other story in the appendices.
Not a quick read.
No, this will take you a while.
It's an involved one. Yeah, it's an involved one.
You're gonna need notes. You're gonna need a bottle.
I had a chart.
A bottle of Chablis.
I had a whiteboard.
Yes.
And then I found out that Booster Gold died. at the very end of my whiteboard.
Complete accident.
52.
Yeah, I don't know. Jack the Ripper to Booster Gold. I don't know what happened. back to Bendis, he did, in that home period of JINX and GOLDFISH, he did my favorite Bendis work, Torso.
With Mark Andreyko co-writing.
Right.
That's key.
And he also drew it as well, like he did the other books. And this is his take on a torso killer who was a serial killer in Cleveland who went up against Elliot Ness.
Elliot Ness was the investigating detective after the whole Capone.
After he took down Capone, he moved to Cleveland, became the
Minister of Safety or something.
yeah,
like that.
which is basically the commissioner, but it wasn't called the police commissioner. And there was a serial killer who was never officially stopped or identified, although there are many theories saying that he was stopped and identified just in secret because he was rich.
Yeah.
And that's what he. I talked to Bendis about this book actually a long time ago. He really is into this because he's from Cleveland and it's a whole Cleveland story. And then Union Station is a book we talked about in a Vault show way back.
It's our very first Vault show, I believe.
Was it? Well,
maybe not.
This is Ande Parks wrote it, and Eduardo Barreto drew it. And this is a small story about mobsters. And it's Union Station is where a hit goes down, and it's just about the fallout from the hit. And it's a really nice little quick crime tale. It's mobsters and is it Kansas City where there's a big mob hub you may not have known in the early part of the century.
It's
but it
fascinating, by the way. Isn't that fascinating?
New York, Chicago, Kansas City was like the three big mob spots.
The trains.
They had good ribs.
Yeah. So.
So those are some of the ones we talked about before, but there's a couple others that have come out recently.
Recently, both Josh and I kind of discovered it, then I passed it along, and Josh dove into
And
it.
he's been doing these forever.
Like the clap.
The work of Rick Geary, I recently discovered, and Rick Geary, he wrote and drew all these books, and he's got a long career of he's worked for everybody, doing newspaper cartoons. He works for Mad. He's worked he's an accomplished comic artist, and he's been doing these volumes, Treasury of Victorian Murder
Or American Murder.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Victoria.
there's a couple different.
Yeah, the different variations.
Treasuries of Murder.
Treasuries of Murder. And what they are is that he was focusing on the 1800s and all these different kind of stories. This one here is the murder of Abraham Lincoln. And then he did also the Beast of Chicago, which is the guy who killed all the people during the World's Fair in Chicago in the 1800s. Lizzie Borden.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of them.
And then this last year he came out. He's run out of murders in the 1800s. So now we've got the Treasury of 19th century murder.
Yeah, maybe that's what I meant. Not American, but
I know. And this one is about
It's not 20th century murder, I thought.
20th century murder.
Yeah.
This one is about the Lindbergh baby kidnapping and presumed murder. And what's great about these is that these are all true crime stories, and they're told in a way that is unlike any other kind of crime book that I've ever read. The way his art is very disarming. It's not brutal or bloody or anything like that.
It's effective.
It's very, very effective. And the way he tells the stories, you could tell that he's worked in journalism and in newspapers before, because it's told at a very, very factual kind of, these are what we know.
It's very matter of fact.
It's disconnected almost. It's separated from, you're not immersed in the story.
Yeah, exactly. And lays out all the clues as the police knew about it, what the investigations were like. And I couldn't put this down when I picked it up. And I immediately told them about it, and you went and read it.
It was a book of the month.
Yeah.
A little ways back. At the same time that I went and bought that, I also picked up The Murder of Abraham Lincoln. I love Lincoln Booth lore. I've read a lot of books on it. This is like a really nice, clean summary of all of the stuff that happens, done in that same style. I think these books are not expensive. This was $9 for the soft cover.
This hardcover is there's no price on it.
Yeah, it's just like a really nice, like a line-based cartooning.
16.
That's going on. Again, there's not a lot of word balloons or anything like that, but it's mostly told in the form of narration. If you were to watch a History Channel documentary or something like that, and it's surprising because the cartooning gets across, especially in this, what photos couldn't do, because there weren't a lot of photos taken of this, and this helps to convey the ideas visually in a way that works much better than, say, reenacted video or something like that, which is almost always hokey. But this is sort of allows you to understand something. There's nice sort of diagrams, like they show like an outline of the house where Lincoln died and how it was set up.
He loves to do those cutaway shots, like the Beast of Chicago one, which was my favorite of the series, which you've got to read. This guy in Chicago built this house, and there were all these trapdoors and hidden rooms, and every room had spigot to natural gas, and in his bedroom was all the controls. So it was like a boarder, and during the World's Fair he'd have women come stay there, and he'd just turn the lever and gas them and kill them and bring them down and send them down the chute down to the basement where there was the incinerator, and he does this cutaway of the house that's just amazing to see, just like how crazy this guy was.
I mean, basically, you could go on Amazon and type in Rick Geary, and you're going to get a list of these books, and all of them pretty entertaining.
So if you're into true crime, then Rick Geary's a resource that you can't ignore.
His style of like dark humor into the art, it like kind of underlying beneath the stories, which is they're just great. I mean, like, it's one of my favorites. I'm slowly adding all the books to my collection because they're so good. I got a bunch of them at the library too.
The true crime genre is a good one, and you can tell just because the way you were passionately telling us the story here.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. The real stories are almost way more fascinating than the fake ones.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And they're way more disturbing because they're real.
Unbelievable to a certain degree. So
I have a house like that in the Hamptons. You want to go?
Shunk. He falls through a chute.
So there are probably tons of other crime books out there that we haven't even read or talked about. If you have any suggestions or have any questions about these, you can email us at contact@ifanboy.com.
There will also be ifanboy.com, our website, where you can go and find, you can comment on this show, which is a good place to list up some other things, tell us other stuff you've read, or all sorts of other written content, audio podcast, fun stuff like that. I believe that's a show.
The Beast of Chicago one is crazy. I love when he does the maps. He does it in here.
Like maps.
Maps are great. Look at that. Oh, I broke your book.
You didn't do that.
Yeah. The Wiimote stays in the picture.
That was a Robert Evans.
It's subtle.
That was his sequel. It wasn't good.
The Wiimote stays in the
Play a
picture.
game?
I would love that.
Oh my God, Robert Evans playing Nintendo.
Like the Wii.
Yeah.
You need a movie on, I guess. Did I think I was the best at Mario? No.
You bet your ass I did.
What was that? Was I gonna whip your ass at Mario Kart? You bet your ass I was.
I played the shit out of Zelda.
She wasn't thinking
How
about
do you
Mario.
like them bananas?
She was thinking about Steve McQueen's cock.
She was playing the Wii Fit.
Alright, and let me tell you, it was working.